The alien ship descended through Earth's atmosphere like a blade cutting through silk, and every human on the planet watched it fall. They watched it with fear, with wonder, with the kind of silence that comes before storms. Ambassador Kethra of the Veloci hegemony stepped out of the vessel and onto the steps of the United Earth Council building in Geneva, her 4 eyes scanning the crowd of human leaders with something close to pity. She had delivered this ultimatum to 17 species before, and she knew exactly how this would end. "You have 30 standard cycles," she announced, her voice cold and precise, "to surrender your world's resources to the Galactic Concordat. Failure to comply will result in your species' complete extermination." The council chamber fell silent. 4,000 alien civilizations had united against humanity, a species that had barely learned to travel between its own planets. The math was simple and brutal. Humanity had no fleet, no allies, no chance. Director Yuki Tanaka rose from her seat at the head of the council table. She was a small woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many impossible choices. The weight of 12 billion lives pressed down on her shoulders, yet she smiled. "Thank you for the warning, Ambassador," she said, and her voice carried no fear, no panic, nothing but calm certainty. "We will need all 30 days." Kethra's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. She had expected begging, negotiation, perhaps even futile threats. She had not expected gratitude. "You misunderstand," the ambassador said slowly, as if speaking to a child. "There is no negotiation, there is no escape. Your species is primitive, your technology laughable. You cannot fight us and you cannot run." Director Tanaka's smile did not waver. Who said anything about running? Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a facility that appeared on no map and existed in no database, a man named Marcus Cole pressed his hand against a scanner and watched a door open that had remained sealed for 200 years. He was the chief engineer of Project Prometheus, a secret passed down through generations like a sacred flame. His grandfather had helped design it. His mother had helped build it, and now Marcus would be the one to wake it. The chamber beyond the door stretched for miles, filled with machines so large they defied comprehension. Gravity engines the size of mountains hummed with dormant power. Fusion reactors built into the Earth's very core waited for the command to ignite. "Director," Marcus said into his communicator, his voice steady despite his racing heart, "Prometheus is ready. On your word, we change everything." In Geneva, Director Tanaka excused herself from the council chamber, leaving Ambassador Kethra standing in confused silence. She walked to a secure room, placed her hand on a console, and spoke 2 words that would alter the course of galactic history. "Begin Exodus." The Earth shook. Not the small tremors humans had grown used to over millennia, but a deep and terrible rumbling that rose from the planet's core. Oceans sloshed against their shores. Buildings swayed. Birds took flight in massive clouds of panic. Across the world, people stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky, sensing that something fundamental had changed. Ambassador Kethra stumbled as the ground beneath her feet lurched. "What is happening?" she demanded, her composure finally cracking. "What have you done?" No one answered her. The humans around her were too busy watching their screens, their faces lit with expressions she could not read, fear mixed with something else, something that looked almost like triumph. In the Pacific facility, Marcus Cole watched his monitors as 2 centuries of secret work came to life. The gravity engines engaged one by one, each activation sending new tremors through the planet. The fusion core ignited, flooding the mantle with enough power to move a world. "Engines at 40%, his technicians reported. "Structural integrity holding, population centers secure." Marcus allowed himself a single moment of awe. They had hollowed out their own planet, turned it into a vessel, and kept it secret from every alien eye in the galaxy. Generations of scientists, engineers, and workers had dedicated their lives to this moment. knowing they might never see it themselves. "Take us up," he ordered. The Earth moved. For the first time in 4.5 billion years, the planet that had birthed humanity rose under its own power. It pulled away from its orbit around the sun, dragging the moon along like a faithful companion. It accelerated past Mars, past Jupiter, past the boundaries of the solar system that had contained human dreams for so long. In Geneva, Ambassador Kethra watched through a window as the stars began to shift. Her 4 eyes went wide with a terror she had never known. "This is impossible," she whispered. "No species has ever, you cannot." Director Tanaka stood beside her, watching the same stars. "The Concordat gave us 2 choices," she said quietly. "Surrender or die, but we are human, Ambassador. We have always found a third way." The news spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. The Concordat's leadership received reports that made no sense, data that defied everything they understood about primitive species. Earth was moving, accelerating, vanishing into the void of uncharted space. Admiral Zethkin, the Concordat's greatest military commander, stared at the tactical display showing Earth's trajectory. "Find them," he ordered, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "I do not care how long it takes or how far they run. Find them and bring them back." But humanity was not running, not really. As Earth plunged into the darkness between stars, work began on its surface. Cities transformed into fortified sectors. Oceans were covered with energy harvesting arrays. Mountains split open to reveal weapons platforms still under construction. The moon, now called Luna Station 1, became a mobile fortress of its own, bristling with defensive systems and manufacturing facilities. Director Tanaka addressed the people of Earth in a broadcast that reached every screen and speaker on the planet. "We have left our home orbit, but we have not abandoned our home. Earth is still ours. It will always be ours. And now it is something more. It is our ship, our fortress, our weapon." She paused, and her eyes seemed to look directly at every person listening. "The galaxy thinks we are prey. They think we are weak and primitive and afraid. They are wrong. We are humanity. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars that should have destroyed us. We will survive this too." In the void between stars, the Earth drifted on. Its lights glowed against the endless dark, a jewel of defiance in a hostile universe. 12 billion humans looked out at the unfamiliar sky and felt something shift inside them. They were no longer bound to one small corner of space. They were explorers now, warriors, wanderers. And somewhere behind them, a fleet of 50,000 warships began its hunt. The chase had begun. 5 years had passed since Earth left its orbit, and the planet had become something its creators never imagined. The drifting fortress moved through a region of space called the Outer Veil, a place so distant from the Concordat's territory that no alien species had ever mapped it. Here, surrounded by ancient stars and cosmic dust, humanity transformed itself. Marcus Cole stood on the observation deck of Himalayan Command, watching construction drones swarm across the mountain range below. Where tourists once climbed toward Everest's peak, workers now installed weapons platforms capable of cracking moons. The mountains themselves had become armored bunkers housing millions of soldiers. "Status report," he said without turning around. "Pacific Array is at 90% capacity," his assistant replied. "The ocean shields can now deflect anything short of a stellar-class weapon. Luna Station 1 has completed its 3rd expansion. We have enough firepower there to challenge a small fleet." Marcus nodded slowly. 5 years of constant work, constant preparation, constant fear of the moment when the Concordat would finally find them. The people of Earth had risen to the challenge in ways that still amazed him. But not everyone had risen. In the European sector, a crowd had gathered outside the regional government building. They carried signs and shouted demands, their voices rising into the artificial sky that now covered their cities. "We want to go home," they chanted. "End the exile, negotiate with the Concordat." They called themselves the Returners, and their numbers grew every month. 5 years of drifting through darkness had worn down the spirits of many. They missed the sun, missed the old orbits, missed the certainty of knowing where home was. Director Tanaka watched the protest from her office in Geneva, her face showing every one of her 73 years. "How many now?" she asked quietly. "Estimates suggest 15% of the population supports the returner movement," her advisor answered. "That number increases each quarter." "They forget why we left," Tanaka said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "They forget the ultimatum, the threat of extermination. They remember only what we lost, not what we saved." The political battles were almost as draining as the physical preparations. Tanaka spent her days balancing factions, managing resources, and trying to keep 12 billion people unified in their purpose. Some nights she wondered if the Concordat would even need to defeat them. Perhaps humanity would tear itself apart first. Far from Earth, Admiral Zethkin stood on the bridge of his flagship and studied the latest tracking data. 5 years of hunting, 5 years of following gravitational echoes and radiation trails, and finally he had a lead. "The wake signature ends here," his navigation officer reported. "They entered the outer veil approximately 40 standard cycles ago." Zethkin's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. "Assemble the full fleet. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier we can spare. I want 50,000 vessels ready to move within 10 cycles." The Concordat had never gathered such a force in its entire history. It was enough power to conquer 100 worlds, to burn civilizations to ash, to reshape the very fabric of space. And it was all aimed at one small blue planet. On Earth, Marcus Cole received a different kind of report. Deep space sensors had detected something unusual ahead. A massive structure orbiting a dead star, ancient beyond any measurement they could make. "How old?" he asked his science team. "Millions of years at minimum," they answered. "Possibly older. The materials are unlike anything in our database. This was built by a civilization that disappeared before most current galactic species even evolved." Marcus felt a chill run through him. The galaxy was old, far older than humanity, and it held secrets that no living species had yet uncovered. What had happened to the builders of this structure? Why had they vanished? Earth adjusted its course and drifted closer to the megastructure, curiosity overcoming caution. The scientists sent probes, collected data, and began the long process of decoding what they found. Inside the structure, carved into walls that had stood for eons, they found warnings in 1,000 different languages. Most were unknown, lost tongues of species long extinct. But one looked familiar, so familiar that the translation team stood in shocked silence. Ancient Sanskrit, a language that had died on Earth 3,000 years ago. "How is this possible?" Marcus demanded. "How could an alien structure contain a human language?" No one had an answer, but the message itself was clear. The builders fled. The hunters followed. "Do not wake them." Director Tanaka received the news in her office, and for the first time in 5 years, she felt true fear. Not the manageable fear of the Concordat, but something deeper and older. "What are the hunters?" she asked. "We do not know yet," Marcus replied through the communicator. "But whatever they are, they scared a civilization powerful enough to build megastructures. That civilization does not exist anymore. Draw your own conclusions." The discovery changed everything and nothing. Earth continued its preparations because the Concordat was still coming, but now there was a new shadow on the horizon. Humanity was not alone in its fear of what lurked between the stars. Weeks passed. The scientists decoded more of the megastructure's secrets, each revelation more disturbing than the last. The hunters were not a natural phenomenon. They were created, designed, built for a purpose that remained unclear. Meanwhile, the returner movement grew stronger. Riots broke out in 3 sectors. Supplies had to be rationed. The fragile unity that had carried humanity through the Exodus began to crack. "We cannot fight a war if we are fighting ourselves," Tanaka told her council. "We need to give the people hope, something to believe in beyond mere survival." Marcus Cole had a different solution. He proposed weaponizing the moon completely, turning Luna Station 1 into the most powerful mobile fortress in galactic history. It would be a symbol as much as a weapon, proof that humanity was not just running, they were preparing to fight back. The council approved the plan, and work began immediately. On Luna's surface, workers installed plasma cannons the size of city blocks. In its hollow core, engineers built a main weapon capable of cutting through entire fleets. The moon that humanity had once looked up at with wonder became an instrument of war. And still the Concordat came. Admiral Zethkin's fleet entered the outer veil, 50,000 ships spreading across the darkness like a disease. They moved slowly, methodically, hunting for the planet that had dared to defy the galaxy's order. Earth sensors detected them first, a wall of hostile signatures moving closer with each passing day. "How long until they reach us?" Tanaka asked. "At their current speed, approximately 30 cycles," Marcus answered. "We are as ready as we will ever be. The question is whether it will be enough." Tanaka looked out her window at the stars, at the ancient megastructure spinning slowly in the distance, at the darkness that held both enemies and mysteries. "We did not come this far to fail," she said quietly. "Whatever is coming, the Concordat, the Hunters, whatever else this galaxy holds, we will face it, we will fight, and we will survive." In the void, Earth waited, its weapons charged, its people divided, its future uncertain. The battle was coming. Admiral Zethkin looked upon Earth for the first time and felt something he had not expected: admiration. The blue planet hung in the void ahead of his fleet, surrounded by the battered moon that humanity had turned into a fortress. Sensors showed weapons installations covering every continent, shield generators wrapping the atmosphere in protective layers, and defensive platforms orbiting like angry wasps. "They have been busy," his second-in-command observed. "This is not the primitive world our intelligence described." "No," Zethkin agreed. "It is not, but it is still one planet against 50,000 warships. Mathematics does not favor them." He opened a communication channel, broadcasting to Earth on all frequencies. "Humans of Earth, I am Admiral Zethkin of the Galactic Concordat. You have led us on a long chase, but it ends here. Surrender now and your population will be spared. You will serve the Concordat as a labor species, nothing more. Refuse, and I will reduce your world to burning rubble. You have 1 hour to decide." In Geneva, Director Tanaka listened to the ultimatum with Marcus Cole at her side. Around them, the council waited for her response, their faces showing the weight of the moment. 5 years, Tanaka said softly. "We worked for 5 years preparing for this exact moment. We sacrificed our home orbit, our way of life, our connection to everything we knew. We did not do all of that to surrender." She stood and walked to the communication console, pressing the button that would broadcast her voice to both Earth and the entire Concordat fleet. "Admiral Zethkin," she began, her voice clear and strong despite her age. "You see a planet. You see what you believe is prey. You see what every species in your Concordat has always been, hunters who have never faced true resistance." She paused, letting her words carry across the void. "But we are something else. We did not crawl to the stars, we brought our world with us, and if you want it, come and take it." The hour passed in tense silence. Neither side moved, and then, exactly on schedule, Admiral Zethkin gave the order. "All ships attack." 50,000 vessels surged forward, their weapons charging, their crews eager for what they believed would be an easy victory. They had destroyed civilizations before, crushed resistance from species far more advanced than humanity. This would be no different. They were wrong. The first wave of ships crossed into weapons range, and Earth responded. Silos opened across every continent, launching missiles that moved faster than light. Plasma arrays hidden beneath the Pacific Ocean rose through the water and fired beams that cut through shields like paper. The Himalayas split apart, revealing kinetic launchers that sent projectiles the size of buildings screaming toward the enemy fleet. In orbit, Luna Station 1 activated its main weapon, a beam of concentrated energy that swept across space and cut through 17 ships in a single devastating stroke. The Concordat fleet reeled. Ships exploded in chains of fire. Commanders shouted confused orders. Formations broke apart as captains tried to evade weapons they had never seen before. "How is this possible?" Zethkin demanded, watching his tactical display fill with damage reports. "They are primitives." But humanity was not done. As the space battle raged, Earth revealed another surprise, its own fleet. Not ships built in orbital stations, but vessels constructed in secret facilities underground, launched through volcanic tubes and hidden ports. 3,000 human warships rose from their homeworld and joined the fight, small compared to Concordat vessels but fast and vicious. They darted between enemy formations, targeting engines and weapons systems, creating chaos where the Concordat expected order. The battle turned into a slaughter, but not the slaughter the Concordat had planned. Still, numbers eventually told their tale. For every Concordat ship destroyed, 3 more took its place. Humanity's defenses began to weaken under the endless assault. Shields flickered, weapons overheated, soldiers grew tired. "They are landing troops," Marcus reported grimly. "Dropships are breaking through in the Asian sector. We have ground invasion in progress." Tanaka closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with fresh determination. "Send everything we have to contain them. We cannot let them establish a foothold." On the ground, human soldiers faced Concordat warriors for the first time. The aliens were larger, stronger, equipped with technology generations ahead of human weapons. But humanity had something the Concordat did not understand. They were fighting for their home, their families, their very existence. The streets of Tokyo became a war zone. Buildings collapsed under plasma fire. Civilians who had never held weapons took up arms beside trained soldiers. The fighting was brutal, close, and desperate. And then everything changed. The ancient megastructure, silent for millions of years, suddenly came alive. Lights flickered across its surface, patterns that pulsed like a heartbeat, signals that broadcast on frequencies no ship could block. "What is happening?" Zethkin demanded. His science officers had no answer, and then the hunters emerged. They came from inside the megastructure, machine organisms the size of warships, built from metals that did not exist in any database. Their forms were nightmarish, part insect, part vessel, part something that defied description. They moved with terrible purpose, their weapons firing indiscriminately. The first hunter struck a Concordat battleship and tore through it like tissue. The second targeted a human defense platform with equal violence. They did not distinguish between species, did not negotiate, did not hesitate. They only consumed. "All ships break off attack," Zethkin screamed. "Focus fire on the new enemy." But the hunters were too many and too strong. They poured from the megastructure in waves, each one a killing machine perfected over millions of years. They harvested ships for materials, absorbed energy weapons, and adapted to every tactic within minutes. On Earth's surface, the ground battle paused as both human and Concordat soldiers watched the sky fill with new horrors. They had been trying to kill each other moments ago, but now they faced something that wanted to kill them both. Ambassador Kethra, stranded on Earth since the Exodus began, found herself standing beside Director Tanaka as they watched the carnage unfold. "This is what the warnings meant," Kethra said, her 4 eyes wide with terror. "The builders fled, the hunters followed, and now we have woken them." Tanaka turned to face her. "Can we stop them?" I do not know. My people have legends of the hunters, stories we thought were myths. They are said to be unstoppable, designed to prevent any civilization from growing too powerful. The Concordat's expansion must have triggered them, and now. She did not need to finish. The implication was clear. Marcus Cole's voice crackled through the communicator. Director, we have a situation. The hunters are not just attacking, they are learning. Every weapon we use against them, they adapt to within minutes. At this rate, nothing we have will affect them within hours. Tanaka looked at the sky, at the three-way battle raging above her world, at the future that had suddenly become far more complicated than simple survival. Then we need to find something they cannot adapt to, she said. Marcus, begin work on the contingency plan. There was silence on the line before Marcus responded. The Prometheus Gambit, Director, that could destroy us. It will definitely destroy us if we do nothing. Get to work. In orbit, the battle continued. Humans fought Concordat fought hunters. Ships died in thousands. And somewhere in the chaos, a terrible plan began to take shape. Survival would require sacrifice beyond anything humanity had ever faced. The communication channel crackled with static as Director Tanaka opened a line to Admiral Zethkin's flagship. Behind her, the tactical displays showed a disaster unfolding on every front. Human ships burning, Concordat vessels shattering, hunter machines consuming everything they touched. Admiral, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos, we need to talk. Zethkin's image appeared on her screen, and for the first time she saw fear in an alien face. Director Tanaka, he responded, his composure barely holding. I assume you are calling to discuss surrender. I am calling to discuss alliance. The Admiral's mandibles clicked in what might have been shock. You cannot be serious. We came here to destroy you. And now something else is destroying us both. Look at your fleet, Admiral. Look at mine. The hunters do not care which species we are. They only care that we exist. We can continue killing each other while they finish us off, or we can fight together and perhaps survive. Zethkin was silent for a long moment. Around him, his officers watched with expressions of disbelief. An alliance with humans, the primitives they had traveled 5 years to exterminate, seemed unthinkable. But the tactical reality was undeniable. Another hunter wave was emerging from the megastructure, and both fleets were running out of ships. What do you propose? He finally asked. Ceasefire, effective immediately. Your troops on Earth will stand down. Our forces will do the same. We pool our remaining resources and find a way to destroy these things together. And after, if we survive, what then? Tanaka met his gaze through the screen. After, we discuss, but there will be no after if we do not act now. Admiral Zethkin considered the impossible choice before him. He had spent his entire career believing in the Concordat's superiority, in the natural order of strong species dominating weak ones. Humanity had been nothing more than prey to be hunted. But prey did not turn their planets into warships. Prey did not fight back with such ferocity. And prey certainly did not offer alliance to their hunters in the middle of a battle. Agreed, he said. Ceasefire begins now. All Concordat forces hold positions and redirect fire to the hunter machines. The order went out across both fleets, and for a single strange moment, the killing between humans and aliens stopped. Weapons that had been aimed at each other turned toward the common enemy. Soldiers who had been fighting in the streets of Tokyo lowered their guns and looked up at the sky, unsure what to do next. Ambassador Kethra watched it happen from her position beside Director Tanaka. I never thought I would see this, she said quietly. Concordat soldiers fighting beside humans. Neither did I, Tanaka admitted, but survival makes strange allies. On the ground, the ceasefire transformed into something more. Veloci shock troops, their 4 arms carrying heavy weapons, moved to defensive positions alongside human militia. Kethorian engineers, their crystalline bodies humming with energy, helped repair damaged shield generators. Species that had come to Earth as conquerors now worked to defend it. The combined forces pushed back against the Hunter ground units, reclaiming territory block by block. It was brutal, costly work, but together they made progress that neither side could have achieved alone. In orbit, the merged fleets surrounded the Hunter swarm and poured fire into it. The machines adapted as they always did, but the variety of weapons from different species slowed their evolution. What one technology could not accomplish, another could. Still, it was not enough. The Hunters kept coming, kept learning, kept consuming. Every hour brought new waves from the megastructure, and both fleets grew smaller with each engagement. Marcus Cole called Director Tanaka from his command center in the Himalayas. "We have decoded more of the megastructure's data," he reported. "The Hunters are not random. They were designed. Someone built them millions of years ago as a kind of galactic immune system." Explain. "They activate when any civilization grows too powerful or too aggressive. The builders created them to prevent any single species from dominating the galaxy. But something went wrong. The Hunters stopped distinguishing between threats and simply began eliminating everyone." Tanaka absorbed this information with growing dread. "So they will not stop until we are all dead." "Not exactly. The data suggests there is a way to deactivate them, a signal that can shut them down, but the frequency requires more energy than any weapon we possess." "How much energy?" Marcus hesitated. "The equivalent of a collapsing star. Director, the only way to generate that much power is the Prometheus Gambit. We use Earth's gravity engines to create a localized singularity, a controlled black hole. The energy release would broadcast the shutdown signal across the entire region." "And the cost?" "Best case scenario, we lose 20 to 30% of Earth's mass. Continents will crack, billions will die. Worst case, the singularity becomes unstable and consumes the entire planet." Tanaka closed her eyes. She had known this moment would come eventually. The moment when survival demanded sacrifice beyond all reason. She had hoped it would not be so soon. "Is there any other option?" "None that I can see, and Director, we need to decide quickly. At current rates of loss, both fleets will be destroyed within 6 hours." She opened her eyes and looked around her command center, at the men and women who had trusted her leadership through 5 years of exile. She looked at Kethra, the alien ambassador who had become something close to a friend. She looked at the screens showing human and Concordat soldiers fighting side by side. 12 billion people lived on Earth. The Prometheus Gambit would kill perhaps 4 billion of them, 1/3 of humanity, gone in an instant. But the alternative was complete extinction for both species. "Prepare the engines," she ordered. "I will inform Admiral Zethkin." The next hours moved in a blur of frantic preparation. Earth's population received emergency broadcasts telling them to move to secure zones, to the reinforced bunkers that had been built into the planet's infrastructure. There was panic, confusion, chaos, but also determination. People helped strangers reach safety. Families gathered together. Soldiers stayed at their posts knowing they would not survive. Admiral Zethkin evacuated his surviving crews to the ships with the best shields, positioning them as far from Earth as possible, while still maintaining the fight against the Hunters. When everything was ready, Marcus Cole stood at the controls of the gravity engine network. His hands trembled as he entered the final commands. "Director," he said into his communicator, "we are prepared." Tanaka's voice came back steady and calm. "Then do it, save what we can." Marcus pressed the activation sequence. Earth's core screamed. The gravity engines that had moved a planet now turned inward, compressing space itself into a point of infinite density. The singularity formed in microseconds, a wound in reality that devoured everything near it. The energy release was beyond measurement. It exploded outward in a wave that carried the shutdown signal to every hunter in the region. The machines stopped mid-attack, their systems overloading, their ancient programming finally ending. But the cost was terrible. Continents cracked apart, oceans boiled and evaporated. Billions of voices cried out and then fell silent. Earth itself seemed to scream as a quarter of its mass vanished into the artificial black hole. When it was over, the planet that remained was smaller, scarred, reshaped into something barely recognizable. But it was alive. In the silence that followed, Admiral Zethkin looked upon what humanity had done, what they had sacrificed, and felt something he had never experienced before: respect. They destroyed their own world to save everyone, he said quietly. What kind of species does that? Kethra, standing on Earth's battered surface, had the same thought. She watched human survivors emerge from bunkers, weeping for the dead, embracing the living. She watched Concordat soldiers help dig through rubble, searching for anyone who might have survived. A species that refuses to lose, she answered to herself, no matter the cost. Earth drifted on, wounded beyond measure but unbroken, and in the wreckage of two fleets, former enemies began to understand that something new had been born. 1 year had passed since the Prometheus Gambit, and Earth still bore the scars of its sacrifice. Where South America had once stretched toward Antarctica, now there was only a vast crater filled with cooling lava. The Pacific Ocean had shrunk by half, its waters redistributed to cover wounds in the planet's crust. Entire mountain ranges had collapsed, their peaks now memorial sites for the billions who had perished. But humanity endured, they always had. Director Marcus Cole, promoted after Tanaka's death 3 months prior, stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Himalayan Command and watched ships arrive from across the galaxy. Veloci cruisers, Kethorian transport vessels, Draukan merchant carriers, dozens of species, all converging on the drifting fortress. The delegation from the outer reaches has arrived, his assistant reported. That makes 47 species confirmed for the summit. Marcus nodded, still not quite believing what had happened in the year since the battle. The Concordat had fractured, torn apart by debate over humanity's fate. Half its members demanded vengeance for the ships lost at Earth, while the other half, led by Admiral Zethkin himself, argued for something unprecedented. Alliance. The word had seemed impossible once. Humans were supposed to be primitives, prey for more advanced civilizations to exploit. But the Prometheus Gambit had changed everything. The galaxy had watched humanity sacrifice a third of their population, a quarter of their planet, to save not just themselves but their enemies as well. No species in recorded history had ever done such a thing. The hunters were not fully destroyed, Zethkin had argued before the Concordat Council. Our sensors detect activation signals from megastructures across the galaxy. More swarms will come. We can fight them alone and lose, or we can join with the only species brave enough, insane enough to make a stand. Many called him a traitor. Some attempted to assassinate him. But his faction grew stronger with each passing week, drawing species who had grown tired of the Concordat's endless expansion and meaningless wars. And now they had come to Earth, to the world that had become a symbol of something new. Ambassador Kethra found Marcus on the observation deck, her 4 eyes reflecting the light of arriving ships. "Director Cole," she said formally, then allowed herself a small smile. "Marcus, are you ready for this?" "I am not sure anyone is ready for this," he admitted. 6 years ago, we were a planet-bound species with barely any presence in our own solar system. Now we are hosting a summit that could reshape galactic politics for centuries. Director Tanaka would have been proud. Marcus felt the familiar ache of loss. Yuki Tanaka had survived the Gambit only to succumb to the accumulated stress of 7 years of impossible leadership. Her heart had simply given out, worn down by the weight of 12 billion lives. She had died peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by the people she had saved. She would have said we still have work to do, Marcus replied. She was never one for celebration. The summit began the next day in a chamber that had once been a sports stadium in Geneva. Now it served as humanity's first interspecies conference hall, filled with representatives from nearly 50 civilizations. Admiral Zethkin spoke first, his voice carrying across the assembly. We have all seen the data from the megastructure network. The hunters are waking across the galaxy, drawn by our conflicts, our growth, our existence. No single species can stop them. The mathematics is clear. He turned to gesture at the human delegation. But Earth showed us another way. They showed us that survival sometimes requires sacrifice, that strength can come from unity rather than domination. I am here to propose something that has never existed in galactic history. The chamber fell silent as Zethkin continued. A true alliance, not conquest disguised as cooperation, not treaties made to be broken, but a genuine partnership of equals. Humans call it the Drifting Compact, and I believe it is our only hope. The debate that followed lasted for days. Old enemies accused each other of bad faith. Representatives walked out and returned. Tempers flared and cooled, but slowly, painfully. Something began to take shape. Marcus watched it happen with a mixture of exhaustion and wonder. Species that had fought wars for millennia were finding common ground. Trade agreements were drafted. Military cooperation protocols were established. For the first time, the galaxy was organizing not around fear of the strongest, but around hope for something better. On the final day, 43 species signed the compact. The others remained neutral, unwilling to commit but also unwilling to oppose. It was not perfect, but it was a beginning. That evening, Marcus walked through the streets of New Geneva, the city rebuilt atop the ruins of the old, and saw something that would have been unimaginable a year ago. Human children playing with Veloci young, their laughter mixing across species barriers. Cathorian merchants trading goods with human shopkeepers. Dralkan engineers consulting with human scientists on reconstruction projects. The drifting fortress had become something more than a refugee ship. It had become a capital. Kethra found him again, standing at a memorial wall covered with names, 4 billion of them, the dead of the Prometheus Gambit. Your people are insane, she said, the same words she had spoken a year ago. You turned your homeworld into a warship, sacrificed billions of your own, and now you lead an alliance against galaxy-ending machines. Marcus smiled despite the weight in his chest. We are human. We were never going to go quietly. No, Kethra agreed. You were not. My people have a saying, when the universe sends storms, the wise seek shelter. But you humans seem to think the appropriate response is to become the storm. Is that a compliment? It is an observation. Whether it is a compliment depends on how this all ends. Marcus looked up at the sky, at the stars that had once seemed so distant and now felt like neighbors. Earth was moving again, its repaired engines carrying it toward the next crisis, the next challenge. The hunter threat remained, growing stronger with each passing month. The compact was fragile, held together by shared fear more than shared trust. But for the first time in his life, Marcus felt something like hope. Director Tanaka had given her final speech 3 days before her death, broadcast to all of Earth and the assembled alien delegations. Her words had become something like scripture for the new alliance. We left our orbit because we refused to kneel. We turned our world into a weapon because we refused to die. And now we drift through the stars not as refugees but as a fortress. We are humanity, and our walls are open to any who would stand with us. Those walls now held 43 species, billions of beings who had chosen to face the darkness together. Marcus returned to Himalayan Command as the Earth began its next journey, moving toward a sector where hunter activity had been detected, the flagship of the new compact fleet. A vessel crewed by humans and aliens alike, took point position ahead of the drifting fortress. All systems ready, his operations officer reported. "The fleet is assembled, 4,700 ships from 23 species." Marcus sat in the command chair that had once belonged to Tanaka and looked at the stars ahead. "Then let us begin." Earth moved forward, its lights glowing against the void like a beacon in infinite darkness. It was smaller now, scarred, forever changed by what it had endured. But it was alive, and it was not alone. The galaxy had thought humanity weak, primitive, prey. They had thought Earth was just a planet, a resource to be exploited. They had been wrong on both counts. And now, as the drifting fortress led its alliance into the unknown, every species in the galaxy learned the truth. Humanity did not run from the dark. They dragged their whole world into it and made the dark afraid.